Good morning, everybody. This is Anna Kay coming to you live on Universal Energy Radio with What Makes You Glow on this beautiful Friday morning. I hope that the show makes you glow and that you go out and have the kind of day that you need to find your own personal glow. And I'm so excited to have Garnet Schulhauser on the show today. He's an incredible man. I'm excited to get to know him for the next hour. Garnet and I have never met, and, you know, I always start the show, Garnet, with a little bit about how we came to find one another, but most importantly, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for inviting me, Anna. I'm delighted to be here.
So, you know, I got an email from you, I believe, quite out of the blue, saying, hey, you know, I saw your website, and if you're interested in having me on the show, I've written this book, and what do you think? And that's not the common way that people find me. A lot of times it's like people that I'm, you know, out there in physical connection with, or, you know, many times people that I know. And so I just want to thank you, because it was so refreshing to have a show where I don't know you, and I get the next hour to learn more about you and to hopefully get your message out to more people. So thank you. This is a really exciting way to do the show differently.
I think it was meant to be, Anna, and I just found you by doing a web search and looked at your bio and everything about your show, and I thought, this is a show that I'd like to be on. So that's why I sent you the email to approach you. So I think it was all preordained, and we were meant to get together on your show.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's even, you know, if you saw my website, I can't recall everything that's on there right now, but, you know, I got married May 2nd and moved from New York City. I'm now living in Houston, Texas, and, you know, life is very different than it once was. And for me personally, I'm looking to expand my own business and actually take it into an entirely different platform, including a radio show, but doing lots of other things, a rebrand and all of that. And in my excitement and zest for that piece of me, I find myself impatient. And this week especially. And so reading your book and preparing for the show today, like every day I've done a little bit just to kind of keep my head in the game about, you know, what we're creating for this hour. And I cannot thank you enough. I have read and reread chapter 1. I didn't have a chance to get the book, and I will be to continue reading it. But it was exactly what I didn't know I needed to be reminded of.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And actually, Anna, if you send me an email with your mailing address, I'll have my publisher send you a review copy.
Okay, wonderful.
Of my book, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So let's go ahead and get started. So that's how I'm thinking so much of Albert, because I've been reading, you know, all about him and your experience with Albert. So I apologize in advance if I call you Albert, because I've caught myself doing that a few times. But I want to start first with, have you written a book before? Is this your first book?
This is my first book, yes. And I'm actually, my second book has been written, is in the process of being published, and will be released sometime this fall, likely November. And I'm in the process of writing a third book. So all of this started,
Wow.
the very first book just sort of came because after I met Albert and we had a number of chats, and he asked me to spread his message to everyone by writing a book. So I'd never thought about writing a book before, so it just sort of came out of the blue. And it took me a while to get sort of going on it, but once I did, I realized that was something that I wanted to do. That was my new sort of path in life, was being an author, and I very much enjoy it. And all three of my books will be. The first book was about my conversations with Albert, and the second and third books will be further conversations and adventures with Albert. So he continues to astound me as he keeps on showing me new things and talking about things that are really, have a life lesson or sharing his wisdom with me, and he wants me to share him with everyone else by writing my book. So I'm delighted that I met him, and delighted that I started writing books.
Did you ever plan to write a book? Was this like a bucket list thing, or I know that you had a very successful career as a lawyer, and this happened in retirement-ish era for you?
Yeah, no, it was never on my radar screen at all to write a book. It wasn't on my bucket list, it wasn't until I met Albert in 2007, and I retired from my law practice about a year later, and partly because of what Albert, the revelations he'd given to me, and sort of the mission that he had set out for me. It just seemed to make sense that I should get out of the law business and start the writing business. And so, no, it never occurred to me at all before. And he was the instigator to get me to thinking about writing a book, and then eventually sitting down and writing it. So it all came after I met him.
Well, let's start with that, because if anyone's listening and they're like, "Who is Albert? What is going on here?" Let's get that straight for people. So you're practicing law. You're in Vancouver, correct?
No, in Calgary.
Oh, Calgary. Sorry, Calgary.
Yeah.
So you're in Calgary. It's 2007. Now what?
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was May of 2007, and it was a nice sunny day. And about mid-afternoon, I decided I needed some fresh air to clear the cobwebs. So I took the elevator down to the street, and there's the street in front of our building is a pedestrian mall only. It's not open to vehicles. And so it's always full of people. So I just took a stroll down the street, as I've done many times before, except this day was different. After a couple of blocks, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this homeless man jumps in front of me, right in front of me, and stops me in my tracks. And he looked like a typical homeless man. He had long, greasy hair and scraggly beard and dirty, slept-in clothes. And my usual practice, because these people are often on that street, and when that happened, I would just do a quick sidestep and go around, because they were often panhandling for money. Anyway, this guy was different, and I didn't do my usual sidestep, because I looked into his eyes, and they were like amazing, sparkling, shining blue eyes, like none that I had ever seen before. And his gaze seemed to penetrate deep within me, like he was looking into the depths of my soul. And I sensed that he knew everything about me, that he knew everything I'd ever said or done. He knew my hopes and aspirations, and he knew my fears and worries and my deepest and darkest secrets. And I didn't know how he knew that. I just sensed that he did. And we'd never met before, so it was really quite strange. So I was standing there feeling a little naked and exposed, but overall I didn't feel violated, because at the same time his eyes were sending me this amazing gush of warm, unconditional love that was just sort of infusing my whole body and giving me an amazing sense of peace and security. It was a wonderful feeling. Never had it before. And so I stood there sort of basking in this unconditional love coming from this man. And I don't know how long I was there. It was like I was in a time warp. And at some point, he breaks the spell, so to speak, by saying to me, "Why are you here?" And then he promptly turned and left and went into a nearby store. And when I collected my wits finally, I decided I needed to go and find him. So I went into the store and looked everywhere, and he wasn't around. And I came back out on the street and walked up and down trying to find him, because I really needed to explore with him who was he and why did he stop me and so on. But he was nowhere to be seen. So I went back to my office with my head sort of all in a swirl, trying to figure out what had just happened. And then that night, I resolved that I wouldn't be satisfied unless I could find this man again, because it was just such an amazing experience. So the very next day, the same time, I walked back out in the same street and searching for him. And after a while, when I was almost ready to give up, I found him sitting on a bench by himself. So I walked over to him and I said, "Who are you and why did you stop me yesterday?" And he said, "Well, I'm a soul just like you, I'm here to help you on your journey and to answer your questions. So then my lawyer brain kind of kicked in, and lawyers tend to be skeptical. And that part of my brain kicked in and said, well, how do you expect to help me? Because you can't even help yourself. You look like you've been sleeping on the street for weeks and you smell like a dead fish. And he said, looks can be deceiving. He said, you look like you're a very successful lawyer with everything under control, but we both know that's just a facade. And what he was referring to there was the fact that I had been asking a lot of questions, in my later stages of my life, and I was searching for a new paradigm to latch onto, a new set of beliefs. So my mind was sort of in a turmoil. It had been for a number of years, and he knew that. So then he said, you can turn around and go back to your office and see if you can find your answers in all those emails waiting for you on your computer, or you can sit down and have a chat with me. So luckily my intuition kicked in, and which just screamed at me saying, you've got to sit down and talk to this guy. So I did, and that's how our conversation began. And he turned out to me, his name was Albert, and he turned out to be one of my spirit guides who had come down to our earth plane in physical form to meet with me. And we had a whole series of conversations. The first 3 times he appeared as the homeless man, and after that he was just a voice in my head, and we communicated by telepathy. And he actually told me that I was the only person who could see him as the homeless man. So if somebody had been walking by the bench that day when I was speaking with Albert, they would have only seen me sitting there by myself. So it was quite amazing. But he was really very much flesh and bones, because I touched him and shook his hand and all that. But he appeared there just for me. And when I asked him why he appeared as the homeless man initially, and he said, well, it was sort of our way, or my way of easing you into my conversation, because had I just sort of started talking to you as a voice in your head, you probably would have thought you were losing your mind. So this was a way of easing you into it. And then once that I was sort of past that point, then he didn't need to show up as a homeless man anymore. So we had a whole series of conversations, and at one point he said to me that I needed to write a book about our conversations so that everyone would have access to his wisdom. So that resulted in my first book, Dancing on a Stamp.
So, I have so many questions swirling around, and the first one is, your life up until this point. What has it been like? Because it doesn't strike me as this wasn't your normal way of thinking, perhaps. And,
no, it wasn't.
And definitely not the actions, right? But even what you're saying, if you had heard this back, before 2007, describe for me what that would have been like.
Well, I think if I had met Albert before that, I would have been open to it. You see, my background was I was raised in a Roman Catholic family, in a very religious family, and I was an altar boy, and we went to church lots and everything else. But as I sort of grew into my late teens, I had a lot of problems with some of their rules and beliefs. And then by the time I was in my 30s, I had rejected a lot of them. And so then I was sort of in no man's land without having rejected one set of beliefs, but having not found another one. So I searched around and tried to find something else to latch onto. And I constantly had these questions rolling through my mind when I would be staring at my mug in the mirror in the morning when I was shaving. Like, well, who am I? Who put me here? What am I supposed to be doing? What's my purpose in life? And what happens to me after I die? I mean, is there a heaven or a hell? Does God judge me? Is there a God? All those sorts of things. So I was really sort of, my mind was roiling with all these questions for a number of years. So when Albert showed up, I was really quite open to hearing what he had to say. And as soon as he started speaking, as soon as he started answering my questions, I knew immediately that was what he's saying was very true. It just sort of rang true in my heart, and it just felt right. You probably had the same feeling when you come upon a truth that just strikes home to you, and that's what Albert did to me. And so yeah, I mean, my law colleagues and partners would not have imagined in a million years that I could have written my book, because I was very much sort of a straight-laced corporate lawyer. Didn't really profess to have any spiritualism or religion, and so I've amazed a lot of my former colleagues by having written my book. Yeah. But anyway, it was so it was really quite a change for me from spending over 30 years practicing law to now flipping over and becoming a writer and writing about spiritual and metaphysical topics like my books are. So it was quite a change.
Right. I would say so. Are people? I mean, what does your wife think of all of this?
Well, my wife is quite spiritual, actually, and I didn't tell anyone I had met Albert, not even my wife, when I first met him, and it wasn't until later, because I had to sort of sort this through in my own mind.
Yeah, totally.
I was not, like, should I keep it secret forever, or should I tell anyone? And so I told her, and she was quite receptive to that. And then eventually I told my sons, and they were quite receptive. And then at that point, I still wasn't sure I was going to write the book, because it was like decision, as my fellow author Sherry Cortland likes to say, I had to decide if I was going to come out of the spiritual closet.
That's exactly what I've been thinking this whole time. I'm like, this really took some guts. I mean, this is a big coming out from where you were to what we're talking about now. It's like a line in the sand, and I just want to congratulate you for coming out.
Oh, thank you. It was a tough decision, because even after I had written the manuscript for my book, I still had the option of saying, well, okay, I'm just going to throw it in a drawer somewhere and it'll be buried forever. I had to sort of, I was concerned about what some of my friends and family and former colleagues would say, and then after a while, I struggled with it, and I thought, if I don't do this, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I had to do it. So I went and took that leap and published the book. And surprisingly, a lot of my former friends from back in Calgary, because I had moved by then, and colleagues, a lot of them were very supportive, which really surprised me. But there were a few who just basically shunned me and didn't talk to me. And I was prepared for that. And you have to move on. You sometimes have to leave people behind and strike out and find new people. So anyway, it was quite a change.
I think a lot of Don Miguel Ruiz, who wrote the 4 Agreements, number 3 is never, ever, ever take it personal. And I've had similar experiences. Nothing is, mine was a little more moderate than what you're describing. Well, for me it was more moderate. I don't know if it was for others. But that's something that I keep having to remind myself, because it sounds like, while it's been an amazing experience for you, it can really confront people, right, and their own belief system. And it may not be in mine, and it may be too much, for some of the people in your life. And I think that, no, please go on.
I'm sorry?
Please, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Just to follow along what you're saying is that for the people who didn't, who probably rejected my book and my ideas, for them it was probably a case of Albert was challenging their belief system, and particularly if they were religious people, and so a lot of people who have, you've had a belief system for a number of years, you don't particularly want somebody to challenge it, and you don't want to think about, what the challenges may be or the holes that they find in your particular belief system, and so it's very discomforting to these people, and that's probably why. But I'm okay with that. Everyone's on their own journey, and eventually, as Albert tells me, if people don't agree with what I'm saying, he said, after they die, they'll find out I was right. So the truth will be known to all once we all pass away over to the spirit side.
Yeah, this reminds me of, I did a yoga teacher training up at Kripalu in the Berkshires of Massachusetts. And it initially was a Jesuit boys' school, and then it became an ashram, and then it became a for-profit yoga and Ayurvedic center. So it's really deep with history, and it's just an incredible spiritual home. And my teacher was teaching about the Bhagavad Gita, which is the yogic text similar to the Bible or the Torah. And he ends the whole lecture, Garnet, with, I have no idea if this is true or not. And it really doesn't matter if you believe it or not. What matters is that you find something that speaks to you. Because at the end of the day, it may all be a bunch of bullshit. But at least pick something that's going to excite you and light you up and make you feel happy to be alive versus the alternatives.
Oh, I think that's great.
When I was reading, the teachings from Albert and what you've shared in the book and then, on the website as well, yes, and who knows about any of it. I like to think that everything that he's saying is true. That's my personal belief system. But if somebody else has a belief system, fine. Let them have that. And I think that, it can be really challenging when, people have different opinions, and the one of all love is not what's common out there right now.
Yeah, I think that's very true, Anna. Albert, he wasn't, trying to go out and convert everyone in the world to his way of thinking, and I'm certainly not trying to do that either. My mission is just to sort of lay out for everyone what I've learned from Albert, and then let them decide for themselves. They can look at what he says. Mm-hmm. They can look at their own belief system or any number of other religious systems, and they should just pick out the one, like you say, pick out the one that sort of rings true to them, that seems to be right, and that excites them, and they should just follow it. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because if somebody who's a Catholic continues to be a Catholic and rejects what Albert says, that doesn't really matter as long as it helps them on their journey on Earth. And at the end of the day, mm-hmm. everyone goes back to the same place. So we'll all find out who was right after we die. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, mm-hmm. if you can be happy with whatever belief system you have, then you should carry on.
Yeah. Something else that just came to mind in this teacher that I'm talking about. He's a scholar on the Bhagavad Gita and a fellow author as well. And he drew this line in the sand, and he said, you're either in one or two camps from a spiritual and religious standpoint. He said, you either believe that you're infinite, eternal, and whole, or you don't.
Yeah, well, that
go ahead, please. I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
You go ahead, sorry.
Well, it helped me to have clarity because I didn't grow up Roman Catholic. I grew up Episcopalian, but I grew up Episcopalian in Central Texas, which I was pretty deep in the Bible Belt of, Southern Baptist, pretty right-wing fundamental churches where, if you didn't go to church, people were talking about it. If you went to church, I can remember, they asked if you had sinned. And I thought, well, even if I didn't take action, if I thought something bad, then that means that I sinned. So I raised my hand. Everyone's supposed to have their eyes closed in this congregation of, a couple hundred people. I'm maybe 8 years old. And then before you know it, I'm up in the front of the church and they're trying to save me. So... I didn't have a great religious experience growing up, and then, did similar to you of like, no, none of this. Absolutely not. It's every man for himself. Good luck. And that didn't work either.
Anyway,
no,
sorry,
please,
go ahead.
Yeah. That's it.
No, I was just sort of trying to, confirm my experience and compare it to yours, that is one of the things that happens with religions is, whether it's Baptist or Episcopalian or Catholic, whatever it is, they all have a lot of, basically they all have a lot of rules that you're supposed to follow, including things like, in the Catholic religion, it was so funny, it wasn't just taking actions that you can sin by through your thoughts. So one of the big things was that if you had thoughts about sex, that was a sin, which seems kind of funny. But anyway, that they had so many rules, and they purported to all come from God. Supposedly God created all these rules. And if you breach these rules, you're supposed to first of all feel guilty because you had offended God. And then the second thing was you were supposed to be fearful because they, of course, always preached that when you died, you'd go before God and you'd be judged. And if you were a bad person, had broken his rules and hadn't made amends, then he would send you to an awful place called hell. And if you're good, you'd go to heaven. So that was the fear factor. I better be good, or I'm really going to have to pay for it. And the thought of burning in fires forever was a fearful thought. And so that's sort of how they could have kept everybody in line, was the guilt and the fear, and which I just disagree with. And anyway, I think a lot of religions are the same way. And so
absolutely.
So that's why one of the reasons I sort of rejected a lot of what they were saying, because I thought they were coming about it from the wrong way. And what you should be doing is trying to attract people with love and compassion and forgiveness, and not trying to set them up with guilt and fear and a whole bunch of rules, a lot of which are just, when you think about it, really quite silly and arbitrary. But
they're
anyway,
really human. Is the way I see it. It's like they're really human. It's not this infinite, eternal, whole philosophy, or not even philosophy, or just way of being. I think about Marianne Williamson and A Course in Miracles, right? If it's not love, then it's fear. So I look at the choices that I make in my life, and I think, like, where is this coming from? Like, is this coming? Am I choosing this from a place of love? Am I choosing it from a place of fear or lack? That concept of law of attraction, right? But applying it also and finding a spiritual home is challenging. It's not, the way religion in our culture and our society has been created.
Yeah, I entirely agree. I mean, that is really the choice that you're making when you take an action or make a decision. Is that, are you coming from love, or you're coming from fear? And it's really hard in our society to chuck away our fears, because we have lots of fears. We have fears that are instilled in us by our religion. We have fears that sort of are prevalent in our society. I mean, fears of will I have enough money? Will I be able to keep my job? Will I have good health? Will I die on a freeway accident? That sort of thing. I mean, those are just the worries that constantly permeate our lives, and it's a real challenge to put those out of the way and come from a position of love. And that's just one of the real challenges we have incarnating on this planet, because we're not allowed to remember where we came from. We're not allowed to remember what we had put in our life plan, like what we intended to experience, and yet we have this free will so that we can sort of make decisions and take actions. And it's a real challenge for us to try to figure out what it was that we had planned for ourselves before we were born, and to try to follow that. And the good thing, though, that Albert says, is that we're not sort of left to flounder entirely blindly, because we all have, like Albert's one of my spirit guides. He says every one of us has 2 or 3 spirit guides, and they're like our coaches, and they're there to try to help us as we make our journey through this life. And they are constantly sending us messages, guidance. And the real trick is for us is to recognize these messages and understand what they're saying and act on them. And all too often, because our minds are cluttered full of thoughts about what happened last week and last year, and what am I going to do tomorrow and next week and so on. We have all these thoughts. They're swirling through our minds, and that often sort of clutters things up so much that we don't really hear our guides' messages. And so our challenge really is to be able to sort of quiet our minds so that we can hear these messages, which come in many forms. It could be like a flash of intuition, a gut feeling, sort of a whisper in your mind. It comes in various ways, but we have to be very astute at recognizing these, and it's just so easy to have them lost in the confusion of all these thoughts in our minds. So that's what we all really have to do, is to try to be better listeners.
Yeah, it's interesting, like I shared with you about this week, and in the past couple of weeks I've been working with a branding coach and really wanting to get clarity around, okay, marriage is complete, so I'm done with all of the excitement around that, and now I'm ready to take on something new. And I haven't done it in a way that I haven't been thinking through things, because I'm interested in it being divinely led, right? So rather than sitting down at a coffee shop and getting my, pen and paper out or my laptop out, then going to spin class and I get my inspiration on a bike, or I've been getting on my yoga mat or meditating or swimming or walking the dog. And, where do you find those places of inspiration? I mean, clearly you've been divinely led to write this book. And it's been a fascinating process for me to uncover those moments of clarity where I feel like I'm in alignment with my spirit. And it always happens in physical movement for me personally. And I'm curious about where you find that.
Well, it actually happens in various places. A number of times it's when I'm walking through the forest with my little dog. And I enjoy being
read that on your website, and I wondered about that when I read it. Abby, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
She loves to go for walks, and so do I. I like being sort of in tune with nature. And so a lot of times my inspiration comes from these walks as I'm walking through the forest. Sometimes it actually comes. It has happened a number of occasions when I'm working out in the nearby gym. I'm lifting weights or on the treadmill, and sometimes my inspiration comes there. And then sometimes it comes when I'm just sitting quietly in my den here and doing some meditation. So it's sort of various ways. I never quite know when or how it's coming, but I'm beginning to recognize now that when I'm getting these messages, that I recognize them for what they are. I used to fool myself when I came up with what I called brilliant ideas. I used to think that I created those. Now I know they're coming from my guides, and I should just be more humble and recognize that's what the message is, and I should deal with it. So I'm getting better at it, but yeah, I find it. The walking through the forest is probably the primary way of me getting the inspiration, which I quite enjoy. So I could certainly understand how you are getting yours as well in your physical activities.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the past I would try to, muscle through it. I didn't practice law for 30 years, but I had a decade-long pharmaceutical sales career. So I'm used to really being busy and not ever stopping. So it's hard at times to sit and be quiet, or to opt for a walk with the dog over sitting in front of my computer and trying to figure it out. It's a different way of doing things, and it's much more, the payoff is much greater, when I stop the busyness and just let it show up.
Yeah, well, I mean, your story is similar to mine, and probably a lot of your listeners as well. I mean, we all have, in our careers, busy. We're very busy, a lot of times very stressed out. So many things on the go, and that makes it really hard, as you say, to sit down quietly and try to quiet your mind and listen to what your guides have to say. It's very tough, and I know for sure that I there's no way I could have written my book if I was still practicing law, because wouldn't have time, and I wouldn't have the energy. Never would have got done. So I really had to retire to sort of kick off the next phase of my life and get rid of all the stress from my law practice, and do something new, which is right. But it's hard. But so many people say that even if you are very busy, it's really important to take, even if it's only 10 or 15 minutes, a couple times a day, to sit and try to meditate and to get rid of your stress. I think that's really important. But it's easier said than done, I know, for most people.
Yeah, it's funny. I teach yoga as well, and I found myself a few weeks ago teaching a lot of yoga, and every morning I would journal about how I picked the wrong guy and I should never have gotten married. And I was writing all these terrible things, and by day 5, Derek was, he's quite intuitive, and he said, "This week has felt like crap, and we need to figure out what's going on here. You are not in a good headspace. I don't like coming home right now. And what's happening?" And it was pretty easy to pinpoint. I wasn't practicing what I preach. I was not on my own yoga mat. I was not meditating like I share with other people to do. And it was just kind of this downward spiral. And by Friday, there's a really big impact on my new marriage. And so we made a pact as a family that whatever we need to do from a scheduling standpoint to have each, for him, working out is also important, that we put that into place first, and then the rest works itself out around it. And I can see where, not doing that would be a big long-term problem.
Well, it's great that you recognized what the issue was, and you've obviously worked towards solving it, or probably have solved it. All too often, those people just don't sit back, and they're not introspective enough to try to figure out what is wrong with their relationship or their job or their careers or whatever. And it really does help to try to quiet your mind, whether it be through yoga or just sitting quietly in a chair somewhere and meditating. Because a lot of times that can help you get rid of your stress and help you see clearly about some of the issues in your life, and help you help you get through your day and through your week and through your your future months. Because life on Earth is no walk in the park, as Albert likes to tell me, and it isn't. But we chose to come here. All of us did. No one made us come here, and we came here to learn and experience things, and we chose our lives, so to speak. So if things aren't going well in our lives, if you think that we're sort of in a bad rut, it's not okay to wonder why God or the universe is doing this to you, because they didn't do anything to you. You chose it yourself. So you have to sort of figure out why you chose this, and what lessons were you trying to learn, and where you sort of trying to go from here. And that's one of the challenges. But you can't blame anyone else for what's happening in your life, because you chose it, and you just have to live with it and change your attitude about it. Because no matter what happens to you, the events aren't so important as how your reaction is to the events that happen to you. And if you have a positive attitude and realize that, well, this bad thing happened to me for a reason, I'm to learn a lesson, so I need to learn the lesson, then forget about it and move on. That sort of positive attitude helps you move forward and lets you live a happier life than if you just sort of take everything negative and think, oh, I'm a victim and the universe or somebody is picking on me. That's just not the way it is. So I think that you have a very positive attitude, Anna, which helped you sort of work out that problem that you had, and now you're moving forward. So that's great.
Yeah, something that I had heard when I started. Actually, our kind of epiphanies happened around the same time. Mine was 2008 when I started becoming more conscious, and I call it, waking up. And somebody said that, and it was in regards to yoga specifically, but I think it can be applied to anything really. they said that their job as a yoga teacher was to help people turn up the volume. And then the next part of that was, and not just on the happy stuff, right? Like as you increase your capacity for happiness, you also, the flip side is that you increase your capacity for, grief and sorrow, right? Because it's like the pendulum swinging. And so I think about that a lot, when I'm in those moments of darkness, and I, know that the light will be there, and then I can only appreciate the light when it's really, really dark sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I think what you said just makes a lot of sense. The example of the pendulum actually was quite good because as we all know, when the pendulum is hung out way far on one side, when you let it go, it doesn't stop at that center. It swings back on the other side, almost an equal amount. So you're quite right. That makes a lot of sense to me. But I think though that in terms of increasing our capacity for love, and then on the flip side for sorrow and grief, I think it means that we have the capacity to sort of take in sorrow and grief and deal with it without letting it rule our lives or letting the negatives overrule the love side. So I think that it's a matter of our ability to deal with these things increases the more that we have increased our capacity for love. So I think that's a great analogy, actually.
Yeah, it's I think about the Buddhist concept of non-attachment, right? So when I'm really, frustrated or sad or what have you, that's not who I am. Just like when things are amazing and so happy and, easy and all of that, that's also not who I am. So it's somewhere in the middle of both of these things, right? That you are a soul inhabiting this body at this time period. And, we are not our feelings. We have feelings. I'm not my body. I have a body. Are the two kind of mantras that I use when I'm really, really high and when I'm really, really low to help keep the middle.
Yeah, and it's not easy to hit the middle ground for sure, because so many things in our lives will cause the pendulum to swing one way or the other, often violently. So trying to stay in the middle is a great goal, not always easily done. But I think people really need to think every day as they're going through life. What you just said was that I'm not my feelings. I have feelings and emotions, but I'm not them, and I'm not my body. This is just a physical container that I'm spending my journey on Earth in, and that when my physical body dies, I leave it behind, and I go on to back to the spirit side to regroup and decide if I want to come back here again. So all too often people sort of identify too much with their bodies here on Earth, which is just it doesn't get you anywhere, because you then sort of lose your sense of direction and about who you are and what you're really doing on this planet. But anyway, that's so I think you have a great attitude, and if everyone could do that, we'd all be much happier.
Yeah, so I'm curious about we had been speaking earlier about having a couple of different spirit guides, and even before that we were talking about love and fear. And I wrote down a question, and I hope that you'll answer it. I think I'll answer it as well if you'd like. But what is your biggest fear?
What is my biggest fear? Well, my biggest fear has probably changed over time. Earlier on, my biggest fear was, whether or not I'd be successful in my career. And then at some point in my life, I'm sure my biggest fear was what happens to me after my body dies. Now, I'd have to say my biggest fear is that I die before I accomplish everything I want to accomplish in this life. Because I'm not. I know where I'm going after I die, and I know it's going to be wonderful. but I just hope that I could carry on and continue to spread Albert's message and finish my books, and before I pass away. And that's my fear right now. I'm not afraid of dying, and I'm not afraid about my career. I've retired from that. So anyway, that's where I am right now. And how about you?
I'm afraid that I won't do what I'm meant to do on this earth. Like, I know that I'm here for a reason, and to help people, and to finding more peace, right, with less, really. And I get in my own way about it, right? And so my greatest fear is that I won't get it done in time. Mm-hmm. And same thing. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm actually really curious. I have even said at times that I'm kind of excited, which people don't really like to hear that, but I'm so curious, and it's not to say that I don't enjoy what we're doing here on Earth as humans and my life, and that's all wonderful, but I am very curious about what's after this. So that's definitely not a fear. I have a very dear friend who just passed away, and she passed away on a Greek island that I've go to frequently. My family lives there, and she left the taverna at like 5:00. She'd had a couple of glasses of wine with her dear friend Rolando, and she walked down into the town square, into the plaza, and she sat down. Her friend came to check on her because she didn't look so well, and she just laid over and died. And that was it. And I think about what a beautiful way to go, right? And it was just really lovely. And so that for sure doesn't concern me, but it's that my fear is that I won't get out of my own way enough to help the people that I know I can. So similar to yours as well.
Yeah, and interesting the story about your friend who just passed away suddenly. I guess in a way, most of us would when our time comes, would like to go that way or die in our sleep or whatever.
Absolutely.
But there are so many people in the world, as we know, who die slowly from terminal cancer or some other disease, and you sort of wonder. You hope it doesn't happen to you, but there's a reason for everything, and for those people, there's a reason to die slowly over 6 months with cancer as opposed to just keeling over. One of the things that surprised me about what Albert told me was he said that no one dies by accident. It's like we die when our soul decides it's time to leave this incarnation. Excuse me, which seems a bit strange when you think about all the accidents on the freeway and plane crashes and so on. And it seems like there must be something, some happenstance that caused this physical body to die. And he said, no, every one of those souls who died in a plane crash decided it was time to leave in that manner. So, so our souls decide when it's time to go, and based upon what we've learned so far in this life and how we feel about it, and in fact we all sort of pick exit points before we're born in terms of a chance to leave, and then we can sort of, our soul decides which one it wants to take as it goes on. And the unfortunate thing is that our human minds, we're not privy to that information. Our soul doesn't say, well, I've decided that you're going to die 2 weeks from now at 7 a.m. You don't get that, which is actually quite fortunate, because I think that would be hard to live with. Yeah, but anyway, but the bottom line is that our souls decide when and how we're going to die. And so the people who die slowly from terminal cancer, that was the decision of the soul, and they chose the manner, and probably because there was some lessons to be learned either by that soul or by that person's loved ones who had to deal with somebody who's slowly withering away and before they die, sort of thing. So there's lessons, experiences for everyone on these things, and so as much as you and I would both like to sort of die quickly like your friend, who knows what our souls have in mind, and you know, we're subject to, we have no choice. We have to go along with it. But that's a very interesting story anyway.
Yeah, and you know, I think that for me it's a little bit different than that. It's not that that she died quickly and that it wasn't painful. It was more that she died in a moment of complete contentment, right? Like she was doing exactly what she loved to do. That was like, she loved going to Rolando's Taverna and having a glass of wine in the late afternoon. I can remember meeting her there many times. And if you needed to know where Hannah was on the island, you could find her there, right? And so I think that was the part that I really, you know, loved hearing. And, you know, I have another friend who passed away playing golf. You know, he was on the golf course, he was on the 13th hole, and that was it. And I think that's the part that I was really excited about. And so when I think about somebody that's perhaps dying of terminal cancer, right, that also can be wonderful, because if, you know, they're at home and you get to be with your loved ones and family and, you know, be re-presenced to your time here on earth and what it's meant to people, that too can be, I think, a beautiful experience. It really is in how we choose to see it.
No, absolutely, and for sure, you know, your example of the people dying when they're doing something that they truly love. I mean, that's great, and but it doesn't necessarily mean that as you say, that the cancer patient is exactly in the opposite situation, because nobody wants to die from cancer, but there are other things that sort of disease can allow you to do in terms of taking the time and recognizing that you are going, but you do have some time, and so then you can you can look back in your life and you can look at the people around you, and you can prepare yourself for your departure, which in some ways is you know, not a bad thing, you know, and I think there's an experience there that some people need to have, and so it's not necessarily all bad if you're a terminal cancer patient, because there are some saving features about that obviously your soul, or the soul of that person, thought was needed. So it's, you know, we'd all rather choose to die sitting and having a glass of wine on a Greek island, but you know, wouldn't that be wonderful if we could all go that way? But for some of us, it's going to be different. So that's just part of the mystery of life.
I have a question for you, and this may come through the teachings of Albert or your opinion, any of which is perfect. So I understand what you're saying about the soul and having a few different book endings is what it sounds like to me. Like you've got a few different exit options, and then, you know, that's free will. Do you think that it has to do with other souls, right? And like, for instance, if we're talking about a person that's got terminal cancer, is that to do with the other souls that they have in their lives? You know, the experience and lessons for them really to be a teacher to different souls that they've been encountering in this lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, part of why we come here, and part of the things that happen in our life are for our own lessons and experiences, but the other part of it is we're also there to facilitate other people's experiences. And so for the cancer patient, part of the reason that the soul chose to have a sort of a prolonged sickness before death was not just for their own benefit, but for the benefit of people around them, so that their, you know, husband, wife, children, you know, grandchildren, whatever, so that they would go through the experience of dealing with somebody who is dying and coming to grips with that part of their lives. Yeah, and so very much so that there's always, whatever you do, there's lessons for yourself, and there's lessons for other souls around you. And in fact, when you're planning your life before you're born, you of course you sort of travel in a soul group, so that the people, somebody who's your husband in this life may have been your father or mother or sister in another life, and so you keep on traveling together and switching roles to fulfill your need for evolution. And so when you're planning your life, you have to get the other souls in and say, okay, well, this is, you're going to be a mother and father, or you're going to be my spouse, or you're my child, and these are some of the things that are likely going to happen in our life, and they have to sort of agree to it. They sign on because they're affected by what happens to you, and they often will build in sort of their own situations where they can learn from what happens to you or from what you do. So it's all sort of intermingled, actually, which seems kind of complicated, but Albert says, no, it works quite smoothly because, if somebody else asks you to take a spot in their life mainly for their experience and not so much for yours, it's not a big deal because, a lifetime on Earth, which seems long for us, it's just a blink of an eye on the other side. So it's not a big deal, and you can come back as often as you want. So in any given situation, you're never really sure whether the thing that's happening to you is a lesson for you or a lesson for the people around you, and sometimes it's a combination. So you're very true. The cancer patient is certainly affecting other people, and they have to go through their own life lessons to deal with the fact that you're dying slowly, in your bed and perhaps in a lot of pain. So lots of lessons all around.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about this. I have an aunt, my Aunt Rosie, and she too was raised Catholic, and we've had a lot of conversations more recently. And, we've talked a lot about reincarnation, and she said things like, Nathan, my son, used to be my father, and things like that. And so it's really similar to what you're talking about. And I've contemplated this and wondered, did I just have too much wine, or did she say that? And what does that, look like? And, I firmly believe that, we have those moments where, when I met my now husband, I knew him, and I'll be curious to find out what that looks like on the other side. But, did you have that experience as well with your wife or your children or loved ones?
Yeah, I did. Particularly when I met my wife, it was sort of I was just sort of immediately attracted to her. It was kind of inexplicable, really. But when I look back at it with hindsight, I know that yes, it was meant to be, and that I'm sure that we had many lives together before this, and in this particular life, it was for us to be spouses. I didn't quite see that with my children, but I certainly did with my wife, and I'm sure that we're all part of the same soul group, and I'm very curious as well to get back to the other side to find out exactly the relationship and to have a look at all the lives we spent together and to reflect on them. I think that'd be just very exciting. So what are the things to look forward to?
Well, this has been, Garnet, I cannot believe that our time together is quickly ending. This has just been such a treat. I want to thank you so much for your time, for your honesty, and for sharing, your message and, your teachings from Albert.
Well, thank you for inviting me on your show, Anna. I had a great time, and, please, you're doing a great job. I look forward to listening to your future shows, and please continue on your path. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you. Well, I'm so excited to read the rest of the book. Everybody can find you at dancingonastamp.com, which is much easier than the spelling of your last name. So be excited that it's dancingonastamp.com. And that's it. Thank you so much, Garnet Schulhauser. This has been a treat.
For me as well. Have a great day.
Yeah, everybody go out and find what makes you glow. This is Anna Kay coming to you live on Universal Energy Radio. Garnet, I knew I would do that. What are you going to do that makes you glow today, right now?
So are you talking to me, Anna?
You, yeah.
Oh,
Last word.
What I'm going to do is, as soon as I hang up, I'm going to take my little dog for a long walk in the sunshine.
Good. Well, I'm going to get on the bike and go to spin class. So have a great one. Thank you, Garnet. This has been a treat.
Thank you, Anna.
So simple and you know it is. You know it is.